Those of you who aren't part of our center, to the Center for Autism. Is anybody here for the first time? Here. How many people are parents of kids on spectrum? Okay, great. And do you mind just telling me the age? That'll help me, because books, when you think about book comprehension, it's a big spectrum in terms of kids. So
It'll be 4 in 2 weeks.
4.
8, well 7 in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
It should be 8 in a couple of weeks.
Okay, 4, 8,
4.
4. Okay, preschoolers and one early school age. Okay, are any of your kids already starting to read words on their own?
She knows some,
Okay.
but she doesn't retain the information that she's learned.
Okay, all right, okay. So everybody who picks up a children's book really knows that books out there that are marketed to really young kids are really not written for kids. They're written from the perspective of the person who wrote them or illustrated them. And what children with typical development get out of them, it's just a miracle that they get anything out of them, to be quite honest. So what we're going to just touch base about today is we're going to have a look at some children's books. We're going to think about, well, what kind of challenges do these books present to young learners? And then what skills do we need for book comprehension? And why do children with ASD have difficulty with book comprehension? And what can you do to help your learners, whether they're your students or a family member, a friend's child, or your own child, or if you're a daycare provider? So one thing I want to sort of do as a little disclaimer is, I'm a speech pathologist, and I think a lot about literacy all the time. And there's lots of different kinds of literacy, but today we're talking about books, so we're talking about reading literacy. And I didn't know whether to pitch this talk towards literacy development or more comprehension of what's in books. So I'm going to do a little tiny bit of both, but most of it is about books and book sharing and what can you get out of a book. So I think I'm not going to get through this whole talk because, I get a little overexcited when I think about books. And I just want to start off by showing you a couple of books and sensitizing you to a couple of things about books. First of all, this is Maisie's Favorite Animals. Look at this book. For what age child, forget about what's on the front. Just think about the board book, the size of the book. For what age child might you purchase this book? Are you going to purchase it for a 1-year-old? A 10-year-old? Would anybody buy this for a 10-year-old? Would anybody buy this for a 4-year-old? No. Anybody buy this for a 1-year-old? Okay. Most of the time you're going to buy this for somebody who's under 2, because it fits in their little hands, or even a child who's under 3. But when you look at it, is there any child who's 1 who knows what that is? Can anybody back there see it? Okay, so no. And the words are duck, fish, butterfly, rabbit, guinea pig, not a high priority word for a 1-year-old to have. Swan, definitely not needed in the vocabulary. Goose, hen, rooster, cat, dog, ostrich, no. Peacock, no. Et cetera, et cetera. Now there's also this like Dorley Kindersley books or the other books that have just a big picture of a photograph of a ball, a photograph of a sock, a photograph of a car. That would be more appropriate content for a book like this. I'm just making the point. Not that you shouldn't buy Maisie's Favorite Animals. It's fine. Okay. The next one, there's a couple books up here that tie for what comes next in terms of development. 5 Little Pumpkins. Now here's the thing about this book. I'm going to let you make your own decisions about who this is for. 5 little pumpkins sitting on a gate. First one said, oh my, it's getting late. Second one said, there are witches in the air. The third one said, but we don't care, etc. Okay, we were going to talk a lot about this book, but I wanted to expose you to it, okay? The pictures in this book are more designed for the visual perceptual system of a young child. Okay? Okay, the next book, or actually a book that's titled that, Where is Baby's Whatever? And there's lots of them. Where's Baby's Belly Button? Where's Baby's Pumpkin? Where's Baby's Beach Ball? Baby is playing at the beach, but where is Baby's beach ball? Is it behind the umbrella? No, but there are some pretty seashells, okay? I might go into more with that book in a minute. The next book would be Moon Bear's Canoe. Moon Bear goes paddling in his canoe. Little bird asks, can I come too? Moon Bear and Little Bird go paddling in Moon Bear's canoe. Turtle asks, can I come too? Moon Bear and Little Bird and Turtle go paddling in Moon Bear's canoe. Pig asks, can I come too? And the very last page, Moon Bear and Little Bird and Turtle and Pig and Lion and Moose go swimming in Moon Bear's canoe. Okay, keep all this in mind because this is going to come back up. Okay, now we have the Mitten. This is in a lot of libraries for teachers, preschool, child care libraries. So, once there was a boy named Nicky. He wanted mittens as white as snow. If you drop a white mitten in the snow, it will be hard to find, his grandmother told him. But Nicky wanted Snow White mittens so much that Baba made them for him. When she finished knitting, Nicky put on the mittens and went out to play. It wasn't long before one mitten fell off. What do you already get about the complexity of this story? Can somebody say? The language, but can you be a little more specific? Pictures are complicated. I bet you it's only going to be a speech pathologist who answers me. When she finished making finished knitting, Nicky put the mittens on and went out to play. It wasn't long. What do you need to be able to get meaning out of that? Sequencing. Timing. There's something about timing. Children who haven't been oriented to time and temporal events are already at a disadvantage. A rabbit came hopping by. A rabbit came hopping by. When did it happen? It's happening. Okay? He wiggled in next to the mole. So it's sort of happening and a little bit past, complex. A hedgehog wanted to get warm. The mole and the rabbit made room for him. Now, where are we in terms of the mitten and the boy? Are you getting a little confused? Like,
It's on the back burner now.
you see what I'm saying? Now the boy is like temporarily, keep it in mind, keep this thought bubble that the boy dropped one of his mittens. Now we're playing a new scene over here. That there's a whole scenario starting to unfold around what's happening with that mitten. You see what I'm saying? Okay, now, Arthur. Anybody have Arthur books? Okay, Arthur's an aardvark, and there is a whole Arthur book series. Okay, here's the deal, guys. Arthur's first sleepover. You open the book to the first page of the book, and look what you see. Okay? What do you think is going on? Okay. Father's reading a newspaper. There's yellow stuff on plates that looks like it could be eggs, and there's somebody in pajamas. What do you think, what time of day do you think it is? This is supposed to orient, you're actually supposed to look at this picture and the story has started. You know what time it is. It's a meal. The whole family is together. The day is getting ready to start, and the little girl is sitting there with her finger up, and there's an empty chair. Is that Mom's empty chair, or is there another family member missing? Okay, Now listen to this, the first page. You see these kids walking down the street. You look over here in the corner. Can you see what it is? What is it? It's a dog, but you only see half of it. What if you don't have visual closure skills? You're not going to know that that's a dog. You don't even know. And in fact, it's not even in your head. I hope it's not important for the story, because you already missed part of it. On the way to school, the girls were talking about the spaceship. Does that tell you, do these girls, have they already been taught, is this a shared knowledge amongst these girls? Is the spaceship something that they've all already been thinking about? Yes, because otherwise it would say a spaceship. Arthur wanted to talk about his sleepover. Okay, the girls are talking about the spaceship. Now we have attention. Arthur wants to talk about something else. What's happening here socially? We are setting up something where it's going to be important to have good pragmatic language skills, because if other people are having conversation and you want to talk about the spaceship, it's not going to be okay if you just go over and say, or sleepover, I'm having a sleepover. Bzz. Off topic, kids are going to give you the cold shoulder. But if you don't have the skills to know how to do that, okay, we can have this, but Arthur went ahead. The very first thing he blurts out is, we can have the sleepover in my tent. We can have the sleepover in my tent. As though the other kids already know that there's going to be even a sleepover. You wouldn't catch me out in a tent with these spaceships landing, said Muffy. Bad news, said Buster. My mom thinks I'm too young for a sleepover. I can't come. But you have to, said Arthur. It's my first sleepover, and you're my best friend. Why do they call them sleepovers, said Francine. No one ever sleeps. That's the first 2 pages. Okay? Are you overwhelmed if you have autism and you're 5 years old? I think so. So I'm saying that the books that are out there aren't really geared. There's so much information. You could spend a whole week on the first page. Okay. Why do parents expose their children to books? I don't know, are you parents the kind of people who feel comfortable speaking up? Or would you rather I just talk? Okay. Tell me why you would. You're nodding your head in the back. Why do you expose your kids to books?
To increase vocabulary.
Increase vocabulary.
To enjoy time together.
Enjoy time together. Okay.
Both.
Okay, so I just, said fun and playful, and I put this little belly button book up there because that is a really fun one. Having time together, it's calming. It provides some structure. It's something that you can hold in your hand, and you kind of have a script, right? When there's just toys on the floor and your child and you walk in, and sometimes you're like, oh gosh, where do I begin? What do I do? There's too many possibilities. With a book, you sit down, all the possibilities are constrained. There's language, social, cognitive development, narrative development, literacy development. And then you, as the parent, when you're shopping or when you go to the library, you're asking yourself, well, what book should I even pick? I don't know about you, but I feel overwhelmed when I go into Target and there's all these children's books, and I want to buy a gift for a friend. Which one should I buy? Well, here are some things that are going to help you. And these are all in your handout, so you can take it home and digest it. But you need to be thinking about the language in the book, the plot in the book, and some aspects of social. I'm going to go through each of these in some detail. Now, when you read a book, you're not just reading the books on the page. You're actively assembling meaning. Did anybody in here read Harry Potter? Okay, when you think about the very first line in the Harry Potter book, and I don't remember what it was, but I imagine with J.K. Rowling that it was something kind of on the edge of your seat. And already I'm like, okay, I'm starting to assemble those words into meaning and create a forecast. What's going to happen? So it's not just about the words and the concepts. We also need to be able to digest the subtle meanings of, did they use the word up or no? Are they saying when something happens? You see what I'm saying? Our author is using these words knowing that immediately we are already assembling the message that we think is going to be conveyed. Are the concepts concrete or abstract? Now, when you pick up a book that's a little bit abstract in terms of concepts, but has these kinds of pictures, 5 little pumpkins sitting on a gate. It's right there in vivid technicolor. Okay? That's a whole different deal than if it says he lost his mitten and there's no mitten laying there anywhere and you're like, okay, well, where is it? Or there's half a dog, you know, and, well, where's the rest of the dog? Or, you know, there's lots of other examples I could give of this. Repetition. Books that, like Brown Bear, what do you see? I see a such and such looking at me. And the whole book is all that, right? Rhyming, this book, with the rhyming. Predictability, like in the Brown Bear book and in the Moon Bear book. In the Moon Bear book, next page, somebody else gets in the canoe. Next page, somebody else gets in the canoe. It's just replay it. Past exposure. What experience does your child already have with pumpkins? And what are the interactive qualities of the book? And we know from Where is Baby's Beach Ball that this, you are interacting in the book. The child gets to do something on every page. So I'm going to give you an example of a book that might have some complexities, but at the same time has a lot of fun components. Sheep in a Jeep. If you don't understand any of the words, you can still enjoy the rhythm of it, right? And the way that you read the book can give your child something to have fun with, even if they don't understand the words. Now, I've made these arrows on this book because here's the first page of the book. Sheep in a Jeep on a hill that's steep. Okay, so a lot of kids aren't familiar with Jeeps, they're not familiar with steep, but there's a lot of fun stuff here that you can then enact with toys, and you can create some steep slopes and put the cars on, race them down, and have a lot of fun with that. But the reason that I drew these arrows is to just make the point that if you look at this sheep's face right here, it's pointed in a certain direction. He is thinking about what's going to happen here. Is this going to be a disaster? This guy has no worries. This guy here is yucking it up, talking to this guy. We don't know what this one's thinking about, but this one is making a last-ditch effort to catch up to the crowd. So already there's a lot of inferencing going on. Uh-oh, the Jeep won't go. Everybody is trying to get it going. Sheep leap to push the Jeep, and they're all doing it at the same time. Sheep shove, sheep grunt, sheep don't think to look up front. Now, so I'm just telling you there's a lot of action that's taken place in these few pages of this book. And so in your head, you're already starting to form hypotheses about what's going to happen next. So that leads me to the next thing about plot. This is what a full plot structure looks like. There's a setting. In the Mittens book, the setting was that the young man wanted white mittens. His grandmother warned him, white mittens, if you drop them in the snow, you can't find them so easily. But the kid really wanted them, so she made mittens. That's the setting for the story. In the Sheep in the Jeep, the setting is getting them all in the Jeep, getting them all ready for what's going to happen next. Then there's a problem. What happened in the Mittens book? What was the problem? He lost a mitten. What's the problem in the Sheep book? Right, they can't get the car to go. Then there's the character's response to the problem. So what did the sheep do? They jumped out and pushed the Jeep, right? And then there's an outcome of the action, and then there's the character's reaction to that outcome. Now, in the Mitten book, what happened is that this is called an episode structure, if you want to get down to technicalities. In the Mittens book, there was an embedded episode. Now, you have to put on hold this episode over here about the boy lost his mitten. Even though he's not in the picture anymore, he's going to come back. And what's happening with all these little animals in the mitten, right? Okay. Now, not all books have that same plot structure because they're designed for children who haven't gotten that far along yet. Let me pause here a moment around plots. The human mind is designed to create a story out of events. The human mind is designed that when a series of things happen, you look for connectedness across those things. So if you're sitting in a department store, just say that you're sitting there on a chair resting, and pretend like this is my purse, and this is a piece of a hat. And there's a cash register here, and I come up and I lay this on a counter, and I do this, and I open it up, and I take out a credit card. She takes out her hand, she does this with my credit card, she puts it back in my hand, she takes this, she puts it in a bag, I put the credit card back in my wallet, I take the bag, I walk away. What just happened? I made a purchase. But if you didn't understand that that event was a meaningful whole and made a story out of it, each one of those events could be completely unrelated to each other in your head. And so because infants already, by 6 months of age, already anticipate the meaning of certain action sequences, they already are developing a story in their head about what's going to happen. So they're applying meaning to the world. So plots are designed to be meaningful and coherent. There are books out there that have just random events from page to page that don't connect to each other whatsoever. And that's fine. This book, Moonbear's Canoe, where somebody gets in the canoe, somebody else gets in the canoe, somebody else gets in the canoe, and then all of a sudden there's a crescendo, and there's a consequence, and it sinks, is a very rudimentary, early developing plot. This is a perfect story for a beginning learner. So the reason is that this opens the door to lots and lots of play, interaction, vocabulary development, and fun social sharing. You can imagine a child whose play development is pretty much to understand that things go into other objects, objects go into objects, and how they can start to play in a meaningful way by putting things in boats or in cars, and then in the end something happens because of that, right? So this is a really great book for a child who's at an early stage of being able to sequence events and put it into a meaningful, coherent whole. Now, what about plot structures? What kind of demands do they put on kids? When you take a book like Moonbear's Canoe, there's not much complexity in the sequence of events. Same for Brown Bear, and the same for Baby's Pumpkin. Where is Baby's whatever, Baby's Ball in this case. And so every page the baby just does the same thing. You know that on every page, the predictability is that the baby's going to look somewhere. And in the end, finally, the baby finds it. Happy ending. How many characters are there? Now, where is Baby's Ball? There's only one character. In Mitten, there's a lot of characters. In Arthur, there's a lot of characters. The more characters, the harder it is. What are the character qualities? In a book like Moonbear's Canoe, there really aren't any qualities. Everybody just wants to be in the same place. In Arthur, there's a lot of complexity to these characters. Buster, if you read the Arthur books, you come to know that Arthur has a certain personality, Buster has a certain personality, Arthur's sister has a certain personality. It's just like the Pooh series, Winnie the Pooh series. What is the complexity of the relationships that happen in these books? What depends on what? And then how much detail do you have to infer? Just like the thing about the spaceships this morning, that when you open that book, you already are off to a lot of inferencing. And then integrating the meaning that you need to presume will happen next. So things that help the kids are nice pictures, familiar events that they can relate to, repeating the same sequence with slight variation, and explicitly linking the events together so that the kid doesn't have to make too many leaps of imagination to be able to follow along. Now, what about socially? Usually we don't think of books as having that much social content, but books have a lot of social content. And in the case of the baby searching for the beach ball, there is an intended action that's going on here. This baby wants something, and the baby wants something specific, and is searching, has goals. So that is a mind event. It's not so much interpersonal, but there's, on the social level, this baby has an intention to make something happen. In this book, the pumpkins, we're starting to get into some emotion. Oh my, it's getting late. We all need to be worried about that, right? Emotional cause and effect, determining characters' motives and intentions. In the Harry Potter series, there's a certain character that we really do not know what his motives are, and the one I'm thinking of is Professor Snape, because Dumbledore, the person who's the most trusted in all the whole book, trusts Snape, but he is the wizard of the dark arts, and he's a scary dude. Can you identify with the character's emotions and perspectives? And what's happening in terms of conversation and discourse? In the Arthur book, there's a lot of conversation happening amongst these characters. You have to remember who said what, because that paints the picture about that person. So what are the supports? Again, familiarity and prior exposure. So if your child has never had a sleepover or never been to one, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to learn about that, to take that out of the book. The pictures are important, and the opportunities to interact are important. Now this is a picture from one of the Arthur, actually computer games. So if you look at these characters, there's some social information in this picture. What is some of the social information that's being conveyed through this picture? What's the illustrator trying to do here?
Show concern.
Okay, show concern. How so?
It looks like they're all focused on the wall.
Okay, you said two really important things. You said it looks like they're all focused. How do you know that?
The eyes.
Okay,
Where the eyes-
their eyes are all pointing in the same direction. If you don't understand about that eyes point, and that what people are looking at is what they're thinking about, this picture, the social information in this picture is lost to you. Now, if you look at the facial expression on this one, not just the facial expression, but there's a gesture. That means concern. Look at her facial expression. Look at his. He's got the mouth that's twisted, and he's got the same mouth. So they're not smiling, jumping up and down for joy. They have a somber look. They're concerned about someone. Who are they concerned about? Right, the teacher. Interestingly, they're all standing up, but he's sitting down. He's kind of holding his leg. It looks like something's wrong. Just from that picture, you guys created a whole story. But if you don't know how to read those social signals, you didn't make a story. It's just a bunch of people sitting around and somebody sitting down. Now let's look at this 5 Little Pumpkins book for a minute. So on the very first page, the first 2 pages, 5 little pumpkins sitting on a gate. First one said, "Oh my, it's getting late." Seems simple and innocent enough, doesn't it? All right, remember our little rubric for this morning is language, plot, and social? Okay, we're going to think about what opportunities and challenges this book provides. First, language. 5. What's that? What's that word? It's a math word. It's a quantity word. And it's an adjective. Little. They're not big. They're little. Pumpkins, not apples, sitting where? On what? A gate. The first one, that is the one at the beginning of the line. In this country, we go left to right. So you could actually touch it if I asked you to. If I said, touch the first pumpkin, she got it right. How many of you would have picked this one? See that? 100%. Said, "Oh my, it's getting late." So in terms of the plot, we have the who and where, and actually we have the when. The who, where, and the when, and we even have the what, the pumpkins and a gate, right? And so this is the setting, and there's even more setting information that comes a little later. And we also have the problem, it's getting late, and we have the reaction to that problem, oh my. Not oh goody. Now we have the social information. We have friends, 5 little friends, and one of them issues a warning of this. You know, if you have autism, you have problems with language, you have problems perceiving what sequences of events all tie together to convey, and you have problems understanding social events. If books are made up of language and concepts, plot structures that require you to get meaning out of sequences of events and social information, it's not going to be easy. Books are not easy for kids with autism. So that's why I wanted to show you sort of a sample of how you can take a book and go deep with it with your child. So I'm going to skip that slide. And what I want you to take out of this slide is what I started to talk about in the very beginning, and that is when you're reading, you are already constructing meaning. So when you're reading to your children or to your students, you want to go slow enough and build in enough redundancy of meaning that they can start to construct some meaning. You're not going to know exactly how much meaning they're constructing because you can't be inside their head. But if you do some play with things related to the book after the book sharing time, that's when you're going to start to see how much they really can represent of the information that was in there. Now, when you're trying to pick the right book for your child, think about your child's play. Now, all children play at multiple play levels. Adults still enjoy putting puzzles together, but they can also do imaginative play. When you're first starting out, though, you don't have that kind of range of options. Your top play level might be just putting objects in a container and taking objects out of a container, and that's okay. If your child is at that play level, you're going to want to choose a Moonbear's Canoe book instead of a Mitten book. Or you're going to choose Where is Baby's Beach Ball book, that kind of a book. Now, if your child is starting to play functionally, to push vehicles, to use a toy telephone, to brush their own hair, now your child's ready for something a step up conceptually. If your child is starting to do pretend acts on stuffed animals or dolls, your child is at a higher level of symbolic development. If your child is playing veterinarian and is starting to pretend that the stuffed animal has a heartbeat that can be listened to, it pretends to use a popsicle stick as an injection, now your child is ready for something more imaginative. So I have a list in your handout about ways to start thinking about, well, at what level of language should you be presenting books? Does your child understand single words in a familiar song gesture game? Does your child understand words in context? So if you just put some toys out and you said get car, would your child get it? Can your child understand single words out of context? So if it's not in a familiar routine, can the child still understand the word? What about action words and adjectives? What about phrases? How complex can the phrases be? Does your child understand complex sentences? When grandma, after grandma made the mittens and he went outside, he was running through the snow and one of his mittens fell off. You know, can that whole thing come together? How abstract is the language? Is there innuendo or subtle humor? Does your child understand how events relate to each other? When they're playing with toy food, do they assemble a whole food scenario? If they're assembling a whole food scenario, they are ready for sequences of events in books. What about socially? Do they imitate other people? Are they tracking other people's eye gaze? If somebody looks over there, do they look there? Do they understand facial expressions? Do they know when somebody thinks something is funny? Do they understand that different people have different preferences? So for example, you might not like beets, but your husband may love beets. And so if you serve dinner, the child's going to pass you by when passing the bowl around. Does your child understand that there's a reciprocity amongst people? I talk and then you talk. I take a turn, then you take a turn. Does your child share? Does your child anticipate people's reaction? Does your child use language for diverse purposes? Does the book offer opportunities for interaction? And if not, what can you do to create interaction opportunities? Then thinking about books and thinking about, is the content of the book interesting to your child? If your child has an interest in a certain content and the book is more complex than your child's true comprehension level, you might be able to squeeze it by doing some adaptations. Now, I just want to take this book, Where is Baby's Pumpkin, which is one of these books, a series here. What's neat about this book is that if you want to really create lots and lots of learning around the book, you're going to have some pumpkins, toy pumpkins, a paper cutout bat, some containers, and some hiding places. And so some of the vocabulary that's in that book are apple, pumpkin, bat, cat, look, give, input, big, little, reach, give, and point. And so these words enable us to build a really neat language system. And so we just need to be strategic with how we use those books when we're reading the book to the children. Okay. So if you're going to do Where is Baby's Pumpkin, or you're going to do 5 Little Pumpkins, you're going to hopefully give your child some exposure to some of the words that are in the book before the book sharing time. So if you're going to do Where is Baby's Pumpkin, or anything like that, Where's Baby's Beach Ball, have one that's nearby and point to it, and then have the child go get it. And then you can talk about it and play a little game to keep your child's attention before going further with the book. Okay. So at home, you're going to be a little bit, I hope this talk has helped you think a little bit more about what books to get out of the library, what books to choose for your child, and then to make up your own stories about the books. Think about freeing yourself from the print and making up your own. And then take turns interacting with the storybook and the story parts. So one of the things that you want to avoid is asking test questions, but you can say things like, I see a ball. Oh, look, it's up. Right? So you can interact with your child and try to get your child to be engaged in that way. Be playful, recap things often. Do some play related to the story, and relate the events to your child's own experiences. And periodically check for your child's comprehension. comprehension. You want to read the same book that your child is reading. So your child is, your grandson is almost 8. So any books that your child is reading for school, make sure you get a copy of that book. Hyperlexia is common. Oftentimes kids with autism learn to read printed words before they understand those words, or they understand the word, but they don't understand what you say when you put all the words together into a sentence. So one of the things that you want to do is draw diagrams of events for older kids. For you who have 4-year-olds, you don't need to be doing that yet, but when they get into 2nd, 3rd grade and so forth, you want to be able to help them visualize what's happening where. You want to start to create people files to help your child understand. So if you're reading, when your kids get a little older, if you do read the Arthur series, have a picture of Arthur, have a picture of Buster, have some of these other characters, and start to think about how they're different. The thing that I always loved the Arthur series when my kids were little, because there's bullies in there, and then there's kids with different kinds of opinions, and believe me, there's a Buster in everybody's life. Your kids are going to have a Buster in their life. And so I just loved using that to sort of help my kids think about what could happen and anticipate with certain kinds of social relationships. And so we want to make sure that we do start book sharing early, in infancy, and we want to be able to link words, events, and characters in books to real life experiences. We will be reading books over and over again, and I know you do that at home, and I bet you your kids have their favorite books. So even if they have their favorite books, you want to keep exposing them to new books. You want to make the books come alive. The book sharing should be interactive, not so much just the child being passive during the book time. And making sure that if you have time to make some visuals, even if it's just some toys that you round up. If this is a book about ducks, go grab the rubber duck out of the bathroom. Create a little ensemble, a little even Ziploc baggie of toys that you want to go with the book. So you can just grab the book, grab the toys, and be engaged around that at the same time. So that's really all I had to say. I actually did get through the whole thing, and I know I went kind of fast, but what questions or comments do you guys have?